Now I want to talk to you briefly about the crucible of yoga. I said briefly. I try to do these things briefly. I hope they're not too long for you. Crucible. I love this word crucible. Crucible is a container. And we do certain activities. It's just a lovely, I like this word. You could say container, but crucible, it sounds classy, doesn't it? I don't know where it comes from, probably Latin or something like that. It's a crucible. And so what you do, what is the crucible in which you cook lunch? The crucible in which you cook lunch is called a kitchen. What is the crucible, the container, the crucible in which typically you do your sleeping? Is it called the kitchen? No, it's called the bedroom or something like this is the crucible. If you are a psychologist, what is the crucible, the container in which you do psychotherapy with people? It is a clinic office or something like that. What is the crucible or the container in which you practice medicine if you are a doctor? Many different answers to that, but one may be hospital. Crucible means the container, so that's why it's such a beautiful word. What is the common crucible or container in which we do modern yoga, which is the one that is mostly known in the center of the bell curve, that most people are doing or most people are teaching? What is a common language term for the crucible, the container in which you do that? Oh, well, let's call it a yoga class, or let's call it a yoga studio. The crucible is the container in which you do that. What is the crucible? If we're talking, which we are, about transitioning to the yoga of the ancient sages, what is the crucible or the container in which we practice that yoga? It's a difficult question in some sense, isn't it? If you are doing postural yoga as a part of the totality of the whole life process of yoga, an aspect of the crucible, yes, is that yoga studio classroom. If you are doing your yoga in the spirit of loving service, sometimes called karma yoga, if you're doing that in the service of your loved ones and your family and friends and you're cooking them lunch, then the crucible, the container in which you're cooking lunch, is called the kitchen. But in those cases, or any cases, the crucible, the container in which yoga is traditionally practiced is, I'm going to show you this with my fingers and hands because it's easier to say, it is in here. It is not out here in the kitchen. It is not out here in the yoga studio. It is in here. Now, I understand that if we know that, then while you are in your yoga studio classroom, if you are a teacher of modern postural yoga, or you are a student of modern postural yoga, and you are either teaching classes or attending classes, and if either you as the teacher have this perspective, or you are in the classroom with a teacher who has this perspective, then what will be emphasized will be things like along the lines of, if you're speaking the same language, the encouragement will be not just do this posture in this way. It may include instructions such as mindfully breathe into the posture. As you lean into the posture, be aware of the internal feeling of it. It may be an encouragement that says, be aware internally of the quieting of your mind as you do this posture. As you hold this posture, let's hold this posture for 1 minute, says the teacher, says you as the teacher, or the teacher says to you, or you're the student, the other person's the teacher. If there's a mindfulness and awareness of this aspect of yoga of the ancient sages, then that encouragement may be there. And right in the middle of the crucible called yoga studio or classroom, within that crucible, you are actually practicing yoga in your own internal crucible. It has less to do with the physical classroom out here, because you are aware that the container in which I am living and practicing yoga is in here. It's in here at all times, regardless of what you're doing. This is the simple principle I wanted to give you here. Plus, I like the word. It's a crucible. The crucible where you and I practice the yoga of the ancient sages is internally. And it doesn't matter whether we're doing a posture or we're doing. They got me saying it, doing. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a posture or you're sitting internally in meditation, or you're sitting internally doing contemplation or prayer, or internally remembering a mantra. In every one of those cases, the crucible in which you're doing the yoga is internal. It's in here. It's not out here. The crucible is in here. Even if I'm practicing, I mentioned earlier, the first yama, which is ahimsa, living an attitude of not harming other people, it would sound like, well, okay, well, that's out there because there's the other people out there and I'm practicing non-harming in relation to them. But the subtler aspect of that principle is that the non-harming that I'm doing in relation to other people, the people in my world and my family and my friends that I know, is my inner attitude towards those people. Such as the most important person in my life is probably a family member. It's cultivating the inner mental and emotional attitude of doing nothing that will accidentally push against that person. That's an internal process. The crucible in which we practice that is internal. Of course, okay, I'm not going to punch him in the nose, and that's an external event because I could punch somebody out here like that. And so in that sense, we could say, well, it's an external crucible. But the real value of the practice is internal. The crucible of yoga is internal. Okay? Yoga, internal.